the motion picture pioneer. In September 1890, a train pulled into the station at Dijon, France, carrying a passenger who would never reach his destination. Louis Le Prince, the brilliant inventor who had captured the world's first moving images just 2 years earlier, boarded that train bound for Paris with revolutionary plans that could have changed entertainment forever. He was never seen again. No body was ever recovered. No belongings surfaced. The man who filmed humanity's earliest motion picture simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind only questions and a technology that would soon make others incredibly wealthy. Le Prince wasn't just another tinkerer with a camera. He had successfully created what many consider the first true motion picture in 1888, a brief sequence called Roundhay Garden Scene that showed his family walking in their garden. While Thomas Edison was still experimenting with static photographs, Le Prince had already solved the fundamental challenge of capturing life in motion. His camera could record multiple frames per second and project them back in sequence, creating the illusion of movement that would become the foundation of cinema itself. But success in innovation often comes with unexpected dangers. Le Prince had been preparing to demonstrate his invention publicly in the United States, a move that would have established him as the undisputed father of motion pictures. Instead, his disappearance allowed others to claim credit for his work. Edison, who had been aggressively patenting similar technologies, suddenly faced no competition for the title of cinema's creator. The timing was convenient, perhaps too convenient, for some observers who noted Edison's reputation for eliminating rivals through legal battles and industrial espionage. The circumstances of Le Prince's vanishing remain one of history's most perplexing mysteries. Fellow passengers reported seeing him board the train, but when it arrived in Paris, his compartment was empty. Railway officials found no evidence of struggle, no signs of foul play, and no indication that he had ever left his seat. Some theorists suggest he was murdered by agents working for Edison or other competitors who feared his technology would destroy their emerging empires. Others point to family disputes over inheritance and finances, wondering if personal conflicts led to his elimination. What makes Le Prince's case particularly haunting is the systematic erasure that followed. His patents were challenged and dismissed. His equipment was scattered and lost. His name was quietly removed from the history books, as others took credit for his innovations. Within a decade, the man who had captured the first moving images was forgotten, replaced by more famous inventors who built their reputations on his foundation. The diesel engine visionary. Rudolf Diesel possessed a mind that could see beyond the limitations of his era, envisioning engines that would transform global industry through unprecedented efficiency. His compression ignition engine promised to revolutionize transportation, manufacturing, and military power by offering a cleaner, more economical alternative to steam and gasoline systems. But in September 1913, as Diesel sailed aboard the SS Dresden toward what should have been routine business meetings in London, he carried with him not just blueprints and contracts, but growing concerns about how his invention might be weaponized for the coming war. Diesel had become increasingly troubled by the militaristic applications of his creation. Naval commanders across Europe were eagerly adopting diesel engines for their submarines and warships, recognizing their superior range and stealth capabilities. The inventor, who had hoped to democratize power through efficient engines, watched helplessly as his technology became a tool for underwater warfare and industrial domination. He had been receiving anonymous threats, warnings that his continued opposition to certain military applications would not be tolerated by powerful interests who saw enormous profit in mechanized conflict. On the night of September 29th, Diesel retired to his cabin after dinner with fellow passengers, who described him as anxious and distracted. He had been carrying large sums of cash and important technical documents, materials valuable enough to attract dangerous attention from industrial spies and foreign agents. When morning came, his cabin was empty. His nightclothes lay neatly folded on the bed, as if he had never intended to sleep. His body was never recovered from the English Channel, though some remains found days later were tentatively identified as his. The official investigation concluded suicide, pointing to Diesel's financial troubles and mounting pressure from creditors. But this explanation satisfied few who knew the inventor personally. Colleagues noted that despite temporary setbacks, Diesel's patents were generating increasing royalties and his long-term financial outlook remained positive. More significantly, he had been scheduled to meet with British Admiralty officials about lucrative naval contracts, agreements that would have solved his monetary concerns permanently. Alternative theories focus on the geopolitical tensions surrounding diesel technology in the months before World War I. German military leaders were concerned that Diesel's willingness to license his engines internationally would eliminate their technological advantages in the coming conflict. British intelligence services, meanwhile, were eager to acquire detailed specifications for the most advanced diesel systems. Any of these parties might have viewed Diesel himself as either an asset to be acquired or a threat to be neutralized. The cold fusion advocate. Eugene Franklin Mallow dedicated his career to exploring the boundaries between accepted science and revolutionary possibility. But his passionate advocacy for cold fusion research may have made him enemies in both academic and industrial circles. As editor of Infinite Energy magazine and author of Fire from Ice, Mallow challenged the scientific establishment's dismissal of tabletop fusion experiments, arguing that breakthrough energy technologies were being systematically suppressed to protect existing power structures. His work attracted followers who saw him as a visionary, but it also earned him the enmity of those who had invested heavily in conventional energy systems. Mallow's journey into controversy began in 1989, when electrochemists Stanley Pons and Martin Fleischmann announced they had achieved nuclear fusion at room temperature using simple laboratory equipment. While most physicists dismissed their claims as experimental error or wishful thinking, Mallow saw evidence of a conspiracy to suppress potentially world-changing technology. He resigned from his position at MIT, claiming the institution had manipulated data to discredit cold fusion research and protect the massive investments in hot fusion programs. His book Fire from Ice presented a detailed case that cold fusion experiments had indeed produced anomalous energy outputs, but that mainstream scientists had orchestrated a campaign of ridicule and suppression to maintain their funding and credibility. Mallow documented instances where positive results were ignored, where researchers faced career destruction for pursuing cold fusion studies, and where promising experiments were terminated under mysterious circumstances. He argued that cheap, clean energy threatened too many established interests to be allowed into the marketplace. The danger of Mallow's position became clear through the threats and harassment he experienced throughout his career. Anonymous callers warned him to cease his advocacy. His magazine faced constant financial pressure as advertisers withdrew support under unexplained circumstances. Research collaborators reported surveillance and interference with their work. Mallow himself began to suspect that his phones were monitored and his correspondence intercepted by unknown parties with connections to energy corporations or government agencies. On May 14, 2004, Mallow was found beaten to death at a rental property he owned in Norwich, Connecticut. He had been cleaning out the house after evicting tenants when the attack occurred. Police initially treated the killing as a robbery gone wrong, but investigators soon learned that nothing of value had been taken from the scene. More disturbing were reports that Mallow had recently received tips suggesting someone had been hired to kill him, possibly in connection with his energy research and advocacy work. The Star Wars scientists. Between 1982 and 1988, more than 20 scientists working on Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative met untimely deaths under circumstances that defied statistical probability. These researchers, primarily employed by the British defence contractor GEC Marconi, were developing cutting-edge technologies for a space-based missile defence system that promised to revolutionise modern warfare. Their work involved advanced computer systems, electromagnetic pulse weapons, and satellite-based interceptors that could neutralise incoming nuclear missiles while they travelled through space. But as their projects neared completion, the scientists began dying in ways that suggested something far more sinister than coincidence. Dr. Keith Bowden, a senior computer scientist specializing in SDI control systems, died in March 1982 when his car inexplicably veered off a bridge in London, plunging into an abandoned railway yard. Official reports blamed alcohol impairment, but Bowden's wife and legal representatives questioned this conclusion, noting that he rarely drank and had no history of reckless behaviour. The crash occurred shortly after Bowden had expressed concerns about security breaches in the SDI program and the potential for foreign intelligence services to infiltrate the project. Vimal Dajibai, a 24-year-old computer systems specialist, jumped to his death from a suspension bridge in August 1986. His body was recovered from the Avon River with his clothing in disarray and a mysterious needle-sized puncture wound on his buttock that the coroner could never explain. Colleagues reported that Dajibai had been working on classified algorithms for targeting systems and had recently complained about unusual pressure from supervisors to accelerate his research timeline. The most disturbing case involved Shani Warren, the only woman among the deceased scientists. She was discovered in a lake, bound hand and foot with a noose around her neck, having allegedly drowned in just 18 inches of water. Official investigators concluded she had somehow restrained herself and walked to her death in 4-inch stiletto heels, a scenario that medical experts found virtually impossible. Significantly, GEC Marconi acquired Warren's small technology company just 1 week after her death, gaining access to her proprietary software designs for satellite communication systems. The pattern of deaths became impossible to ignore as more scientists perished in increasingly bizarre circumstances. Dr. Avtar Singh Gida was found dead at the bottom of a cliff in Lanzarote after what authorities called a hiking accident, despite the fact that Singh Gida was known to suffer from severe vertigo and avoided heights. His research involved electromagnetic warfare systems that could disable enemy electronics from orbit. Professor Trevor Ash died when his car accelerated uncontrollably into a brick wall, though mechanical inspection revealed no faults with the vehicle's systems. Ash had been developing stealth technology that could render satellites invisible to radar detection. By 1987, the deaths had attracted media attention and parliamentary questions about whether British defence scientists were being systematically targeted by foreign intelligence services. Some MPs suggested that the Soviet Union was conducting an assassination campaign to cripple Western missile defense capabilities. Others wondered if the scientists had discovered something so sensitive that their own governments viewed them as security risks. The British Ministry of Defence dismissed these concerns, attributing the deaths to the exceptional stress of working on classified projects under intense time pressure. What made these deaths particularly suspicious was their timing. Most occurred just as critical SDI technologies were nearing breakthrough moments, or when scientists were scheduled to present findings to military officials. Several victims had recently expressed doubts about the safety or ethics of their research, while others had been approached by foreign agents offering substantial sums for technical information. The concentration of deaths within a single company, working on the most sensitive aspects of space-based warfare, suggested coordination rather than coincidence. The biological weapons inspector, David Kelly, possessed knowledge that could have prevented a war, but that same knowledge may have sealed his fate. As one of Britain's leading experts on biological and chemical weapons, Kelly had spent years investigating Iraq's weapons programs as a United Nations inspector. His meticulous work had revealed that Saddam Hussein's alleged weapons of mass destruction were largely fictional, a finding that directly contradicted the intelligence claims being used to justify military invasion. When Kelly became a whistleblower, sharing his findings with BBC journalist Andrew Gilligan, he unknowingly triggered a chain of events that would end with his mysterious death in an Oxfordshire woodland. Kelly's expertise made him invaluable to the weapons inspection process, but also dangerous to political leaders who needed public support for military action. He had personally examined suspected weapons facilities, interviewed Iraqi scientists, and analysed chemical residues that told the true story of Iraq's military capabilities. His conclusion was unambiguous. The intelligence dossier claiming Iraq possessed deployable biological and chemical weapons had been deliberately exaggerated to strengthen the case for invasion. The revelation that Kelly was Gilligan's source exposed him to enormous pressure from government officials who demanded his silence. He was summoned for aggressive questioning by parliamentary committees, subjected to public ridicule by politicians who questioned his competence and threatened with the loss of his career and pension. Colleagues noted that Kelly, normally calm and methodical, appeared increasingly distressed as the political storm intensified around him. He confided to friends that he felt trapped between his scientific integrity and loyalty to his employers. On July 17, 2003, Kelly left his Oxfordshire home for what he told his wife would be a routine walk in the nearby woods. When he failed to return that evening, search teams discovered his body the following morning beside a quiet stream. The official investigation concluded that Kelly had committed suicide by cutting his wrist with a gardening knife and consuming an overdose of painkillers. However, medical experts who examined the evidence raised serious questions about this verdict. The supposed cause of death involved severing the ulnar artery, a method so unusual that Kelly was reportedly the only person to die this way in Britain during 2003. Paramedics and doctors who attended the scene noted the surprising lack of blood, far less than would be expected from such a wound. The knife found beside Kelly's body bore no fingerprints, and the quantity of painkillers in his system was insufficient to cause death. These inconsistencies fueled speculation that Kelly had been murdered by intelligence services, seeking to prevent further revelations about weapons intelligence. The water-powered engine. Stanley Meyer claimed to have solved humanity's energy crisis with nothing more than water and electrical current, but his revolutionary invention may have made him a target for elimination by powerful interests threatened by unlimited clean fuel. In the 1990s, Meyer demonstrated a modified dune buggy that could run indefinitely using only water as its energy source, splitting H2O molecules into hydrogen and oxygen through a process he called electrolytic dissociation. His technology promised to make petroleum obsolete overnight, offering drivers the ability to fuel their vehicles from any tap, lake, or stream. Meyer's water fuel cell violated accepted principles of thermodynamics by appearing to produce more energy than it consumed, a phenomenon that mainstream scientists dismissed as impossible. However, his public demonstrations consistently showed vehicles running on water alone, producing only water vapor as exhaust. Independent observers confirmed that no hidden fuel sources powered his engines, and Meyer welcomed scientific scrutiny of his devices. He held multiple patents for his invention and attracted serious interest from investors, military officials, and foreign governments eager to acquire game-changing energy technology. The implications of Meyer's breakthrough extended far beyond automotive applications. His process could theoretically power homes, factories, and entire cities using abundant water resources instead of fossil fuels. Such technology would eliminate dependence on oil imports, reduce pollution to near zero, and democratize energy production by making fuel freely available to anyone with access to water. These possibilities represented existential threats to petroleum companies, utility monopolies, and nations whose economies depended on energy scarcity. Meyer reported receiving numerous threats as his invention gained attention, warning him to cease development or face consequences. Representatives from major corporations offered him substantial sums to purchase and suppress his patents, deals he consistently refused because he believed clean energy should benefit all humanity. He claimed that government agents had approached him with demands to classify his research under national security provisions, attempts to remove the technology from public access, and control its development through military channels. On March 20th, 1998, Meyer was dining at a restaurant with two Belgian investors when he suddenly ran outside, clutching his throat and shouting that he had been poisoned. He collapsed in the parking lot and died before medical help could arrive. The official cause of death was listed as a cerebral aneurysm, with no toxins detected in his system. However, Meyer's brother reported that the inventor's prototype vehicle and all experimental equipment vanished from his workshop within days of his death, suggesting that someone had systematically removed evidence of his breakthrough. The wireless power visionary. Nikola Tesla died alone and impoverished in a New York hotel room in 1943. But his death marked the end of humanity's closest approach to unlimited wireless energy transmission. Tesla had envisioned a world where electrical power could be transmitted through the atmosphere without wires, cables, or infrastructure, making energy freely available to anyone with a simple receiving device. His Wardenclyffe Tower project on Long Island represented the culmination of decades spent developing wireless transmission technology that could have eliminated energy scarcity forever. Tesla's wireless power system worked by using the Earth itself as a conductor, creating standing waves of electrical energy that could be tapped anywhere on the planet. His tower facility included massive copper coils, buried grounding systems, and high-voltage generators designed to pump electrical energy into the planet's natural electromagnetic field. Receivers tuned to the correct frequency could extract power from this field without any physical connection to the transmission source, enabling lights, motors, and communication devices to operate anywhere in the world. The project initially attracted funding from financier J.P. Morgan, who saw potential profit in wireless communication services. However, when Tesla revealed that his true goal was free energy transmission without any metering or payment systems, Morgan immediately withdrew support and blocked other investors from backing the project. The question Morgan reportedly asked, "Where do we put the meter?" exposed the fundamental threat Tesla's vision posed to centralized power utilities and energy monopolies. Tesla continued his wireless transmission research despite losing financial backing, conducting experiments that demonstrated successful power transmission over considerable distances. However, his work was increasingly hampered by equipment failures, suspicious fires, and interference that suggested deliberate sabotage by parties threatened by his discoveries. Documents from this period hint at a working system that required precise planetary alignment and electromagnetic conditions that, once disrupted, might never be recoverable through conventional means. When Tesla died in 1943, government agents immediately seized his papers and experimental equipment, classifying much of his research under national security provisions. The most important notebooks related to wireless power transmission disappeared entirely, with some reports suggesting they were destroyed to prevent the technology from falling into enemy hands during World War II. Others believe the research was quietly absorbed into classified military programs that continue to explore wireless energy transmission for defense applications. The environmental revolutionary. Thomas Migley Jr. may have been history's most environmentally destructive inventor, but the circumstances of his death suggest someone wanted to ensure his dangerous innovations would never be repeated. Migley developed both leaded gasoline and chlorofluorocarbon refrigerants, chemicals that would eventually poison the atmosphere and destroy the ozone layer. By the 1940s, evidence was mounting that his creations posed serious health and environmental risks. Knowledge that made Midgley himself a potential liability for the corporations profiting from his discoveries. Midgley's leaded gasoline additive had made him wealthy and famous during the 1920s, solving the problem of engine knock that limited automotive performance. However, he was well aware of lead's toxic properties from the beginning, having suffered lead poisoning himself during early experiments. Despite this knowledge, he actively promoted leaded fuel through public demonstrations where he washed his hands in tetraethyl lead and inhaled its vapors to prove its safety. These theatrical displays helped convince the public and regulators that lead additives posed no health risks. Similarly, Migley's development of Freon and other CFC compounds revolutionized refrigeration by replacing toxic ammonia and sulfur dioxide coolants with seemingly inert alternatives. He demonstrated Freon's safety by inhaling it and blowing out a candle, showing that the gas was neither poisonous nor flammable. However, scientists were beginning to understand that CFCS could persist in the atmosphere for decades and eventually destroy the ozone layer that protects Earth from harmful ultraviolet radiation. By 1944, Midgley had contracted polio and lost the use of his legs, confining him to bed with a complex pulley system he designed to help him move and position himself. On November 2nd of that year, he was found strangled by the ropes of his own invention. His death officially ruled an accidental entanglement. However, the timing coincided with growing scrutiny of leaded gasoline's health effects and the first scientific papers questioning the long-term safety of CFC compounds. The peculiar circumstances of Midgley's death have fueled speculation that corporate interests arranged his elimination to prevent him from revealing the full extent of his knowledge about his invention's dangers. As the creator of these compounds, Midgley possessed detailed information about their toxic properties and the industry's awareness of potential health and environmental risks. His testimony could have exposed decades of corporate deception and resulted in massive legal and financial consequences for chemical and petroleum companies. These 8 cases reveal a pattern that extends far beyond coincidence or natural causes. From Louis Leprince's vanishing on a French railway to the systematic elimination of Star Wars scientists, we see the same methodology repeated. Breakthrough technologies emerge, threaten established power structures, and then disappear along with their creators. The inventors who dared to challenge the boundaries of physics, energy, and human potential paid the ultimate price for their vision. What unites these stories is not the technologies themselves, but the economic disruption they represented. Free energy threatens trillion-dollar industries. Unlimited transportation destroys logistics monopolies. Perfect medical devices eliminate pharmaceutical profits. Revolutionary weapons shift military balance. Each invention promised to democratize power, eliminate scarcity, or bypass control systems that keep humanity dependent on centralized authorities. The suppression machinery operates through methods both subtle and brutal. Patent acquisitions bury technologies in corporate vaults. Regulatory harassment exhausts inventor resources. Financial warfare destroys funding sources. Academic ridicule discredits breakthrough claims. And when these softer approaches fail, more permanent solutions ensure that dangerous knowledge never reaches public consciousness. Today, this suppression continues through information warfare that conditions public expectations to automatically reject revolutionary claims. We are taught that certain breakthroughs are impossible, even as classified programs successfully exploit the same phenomena for military applications. The gap between secret capabilities and public technology grows wider each year, creating a world where miracles exist, but remain forever hidden from those who need them most. Perhaps the greatest tragedy is not what these inventors achieved, but what humanity lost when their discoveries were erased. We live in a world powered by scarcity, controlled by limitations, and constrained by technologies deliberately kept inferior to maintain existing power structures. The future these inventors glimpsed, one of unlimited clean energy, perfect health, and liberated human potential, remains locked away, guarded by those who profit from our dependence. The question is not whether these suppressed technologies could change the world. The question is whether we will ever be allowed to find out.